Part 48. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 471. Who are you? The long-haired man had vicissitudes of life and bloodshot eyes. When he heard Mu Chiu say the name Lujins, the rage in his eyes faded and his mind gradually became clear. The long-haired man stared straight at the black-robed figure in front of him. His throat seemed to be rubbed by sandpaper, and he made a hoarse sound. Although he was on the verge of madness, he knew that this name would never be mentioned by the alien believers. What's important is not who I am, but why the guardian of Qingyang Base, one of the two heroes of Shan's, was imprisoned at the bottom of this dark lake. The man's magnetic voice came from the mask, plain but with an unexplainable calmness. It seemed that he really didn't take this destructive existence seriously. The long-haired man's eyeballs suddenly twitched for a moment, and he opened his dry lips with a bitter smile. Yes, I am the Lujins you mentioned. He tried to wave his arms, but the iron chain on his wrists clamped him tightly, and several mottled bloodstains on his wrists showed signs of struggle. Mu Chiu stared at the man in front of him who looked like a savage, with a gleam in his eyes. The latter calmed down and no longer had the crazy look just now, but instead had a bit more of the character and temperament of a scholar. It is hard to imagine what kind of experience would force this man in front of him to become a madman who stirs up the storm at the bottom of the lake. I didn't expect that Lujins, who was rumored to have disappeared after going deep into the beast's nest, would become like this. When Lujins heard Mu Chiu's slightly teasing words, he just slowly lowered his head, and a faint light flickered in his turbid eyes. Through the messy hair, you can still vaguely see his somewhat bitter face, and he spoke in a self-deprecating tone. Everyone knows Lujins, who guards the southern border of Hongzhuangjiang, but they don't know his other identity. One of the 12 priests of the alien sect who caused chaos in the world and was despised by the human race in the last days, codenamed Zhigzu. Lujin's tone was particularly heavy, and he was angry but also a little annoyed and unwilling. As soon as these words came out, an indescribable breath was released from the scarred Lujins, and the surrounding water began to roll back wildly. 12 priests. Mu Chiu's eyes flashed with a sharp light, and his eyes narrowed slightly. In his eyes, Lujins, who was shirtless, suddenly put on a blood-red robe, disappearing in the layers of darkness covered by the end of the world, mysterious and obscure. The whereabouts of the heterogeneous cult have always been mysterious, as if they have placed undercover spies in the top of every human power. Even Wu Fa, one of the 3 destructive level masters of Yu Hai in the past, and Duan Mu Chen, the absolute ruler of Zilan Base, such pillars are all members of the Sacrifice Immortal Division. What's more terrifying is that until now, the heterogeneous cult has only been on the secret edge of major events, but no one knows what their real purpose is. But now, even Lujins, who is guarding a territory in front of him, is a member of the 12 Sacrifice Immortal Divisions, which makes people have to be shocked by the huge power of the heterogeneous cult. The 12 Sacrificial Immortals. Mu Chiu's eyes were deep, and his tone seemed quite indifferent. If I'm not mistaken, your current appearance has nothing to do with the mysterious Sacrificial Immortals. The 12 Sacrificial Immortals. Lujin spread out his palms covered with blood and marks, and sneered. Do you know who gave me this appearance now? It was the so-called heterogeneous religion and the 12 Sacrificial Immortals. Lujin's originally elegant temperament suddenly changed, his eyes suddenly became bloodshot, and his expression became crazy again. And the one who imprisoned me here was my elder brother, Lujin Chang, who was known as Lian Chenghui. Lujin Chang is also one of the 12 Sacrificial Immortals. Mu Chiu heard this, and a gleam of light flashed in his deep eyes. In just a short moment, the news revealed from the bottom of this deep lake was enough to shock the world. The Shan's duo who suppressed the southern border turned out to be a member of this mysterious heterogeneous religion. Mu Chiu suddenly thought of the fact that the encirclement and suppression of the beast nest was led by Lujin Chang. So, This battle against the Beast King was a conspiracy of the alien religion from the beginning. As if seeing Muchu's silence, Lujins continued to speak. Now it seems that my elder brother has contacted various reinforcements to rush to the beast nest. Although he was imprisoned at the bottom of the deep lake, Lujin seemed to know everything about the outside world. Before Muchu asked, Lujin said. As early as half a year ago, the Beast King appeared out of thin air and descended on the 10,000 Beasts mountain range, and within a few months, he quickly ruled the 10,000 Beasts nest located in the deepest part of the mountain range. Even the Dark Crow, which is also at the destruction level, had to retreat to the edge of the mountain range under its powerful might. Because they coveted something from the Beast King, the church did not strangle it immediately, but chose to let it grow. However, during this period, something happened that we had never expected. Lujin seemed to be talking to himself, but the expression on his face showed surprise. The Lord of Eternal Night in the East Sky territory led the Eternal Night dynasty to rise rapidly. Before we could react, it had rapidly expanded its power. Even the Zilan base, which has strategic significance within the sect, was destroyed in one fell swoop. Speaking of the Lord of Eternal Night, the expression on Lujin's face became even weirder. The emergence of the Lord of Eternal Night became the biggest change in our plan. It was not until the later Battle of Dawn that the Corpse King actually achieved the supreme existence beyond the destruction level, the principal source level. The church could no longer allow the Yonjai dynasty to expand, so it made an unprecedented decision. Gather the power of many disciples in the sect and use all their strength to kill the Lord of Eternal Night. Hearing what Lujin said, a flash of blood flashed in Muchu's deep eyes. He has never been an easy person to get along with. Ever since the pagan cult has repeatedly opposed him, the two have been destined to fight to the death. However, just as several immortal priests were uniting to attack the Lord of Eternal Night, a burst of ancient auras suddenly came from the nest of beasts. The Beast King in the nest of beasts actually started trying to reach the principal source level. Lujins grabbed the messy long hair on his head, with indescribable sadness and annoyance in his tone. With the lessons learned from the Lord of Eternal Night, we will never let another principal level opponent appear again. So I waited for the remaining priests to launch an attack on the beast's nest as soon as possible. But we obviously underestimated the strength of the Beast King. Although he has not yet broken through the source of the power, his strength is far beyond what our few destruction-level emissaries can compete with. After a great battle, the final result was that our teaching envoys retreated in defeat and were seriously injured. However, the Beast King also suffered a setback in strength and missed the best opportunity to be promoted to the source of the truth. Lujin's scarlet eyeballs were filled with bloodshot eyes, as if he had recalled some unforgettable experience. I was seriously injured after returning to the base, but what I didn't expect was that I would see a close relative there whom I had not seen for a long time, my daughter, Lu Qianqian. He suddenly fell to his knees, tears of blood streaming from his eyes. I will never forget the sight of my daughter kneeling in front of me and calling me. When she was dying, it reminded me of many things in a flash. Including, I once killed my favorite wife with my own hands. A trace of blood seeped out from his long hair and floated in the water. Lujin spread his palms, feeling extremely sad. My eldest brother and I did not join the heterogeneous religion voluntarily at the beginning, but were manipulated by others, and we got to this position step by step like puppets. Lujin's open palms were filled with blood holes. Upon closer inspection, there were blood holes on his back and shoulders that had not yet healed. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 472. Being manipulated. Muchu did not expect that such a powerful pair of brothers, Lujin Chang and Lujins, who were at the level of destruction, would be manipulated by others to become a member of the heterogeneous religion. Since you know about the heterogeneous religion, do you know the origin of this heterogeneous religion? Muchu shook his head. Everyone knew that the heterogeneous religion had done all kinds of evil things and was abandoned by the human race, but no one knew how the heterogeneous religion was born and what its purpose was. The reason why the heterogeneous religion is called a cult is because it is the best at bewitching people and advocating evil arts such as killing and blood sacrifice. However, what the world does not know is that this cult already existed long before the outbreak of the apocalypse. Another heavy news came out of Lucian's mouth. At that time, the apocalypse had just begun. My elder brother and I also awakened our special powers and saved tens of thousands of humans during a zombie siege. But even so, the crisis of the zombie tide was far from over. The increasing lack of food alone was enough to drive the remaining human race crazy. My elder brother and I had no other options. In despair, a mysterious figure in a red robe appeared before us. Muchu's eyes suddenly flashed. Red-robed cult leader, immortal sacrifice master. Lucian's nodded, that's right. At that time, we didn't know the existence of the alien cult, nor did we know what kind of abyss we had fallen into. The red-robed man gave us two brothers powerful strength. We were simply unmatched in the early days of the apocalypse. Not only did we resolve the zombie crisis, but we also cleared out the zombies in the surrounding towns in one fell swoop. More and more human races joined the Qingyang base after hearing the news, and the reputation of the Shan's duo grew stronger and stronger. We gradually believed in the mysterious red-robed man who gave us powerful strength, joined the church that he said could bring salvation to the world in the apocalypse, and even treated him as a guest of honor. But we didn't expect that this was just the beginning of a nightmare. Lucian's knelt on the ground, scratching frantically, stroking his hair. As time went by, my brother and I found that our temperaments had changed in some way. Many cruel decisions that we had never dared to think of before could be implemented without hesitation. At first we didn't care, and still used the resources given by the red robes to upgrade our levels and expand our territory. But later, our temperaments changed so much that we even attracted suspicion and panic from our families. At this moment, we realized how much we had changed. But, it's too late, everything is too late. My brother and I had already taken power from the red robes when we first started. I have been secretly manipulated by him, and many decisions that go against my will are subtly influenced by that red-robed man. This situation has not been eliminated after my two brothers were promoted to the destruction level, but has become more and more serious. Many times we can't even control our actions, just like puppets at his mercy. Lucian's tone actually brought tears to his eyes. I even killed my wife who I loved for many years with my own hands. The middle-aged man with scars all over his body regained his madness again, and the water at the bottom of the lake began to roll back and rage at a high speed, turning into small water dragons that surged out. I was worried that I would kill my daughter again out of control, so I sent her to the distant Dongxiao Yuhe to carry out the mission. But I didn't expect that the entire Dongxiao domain was actually annexed by the Yanjai dynasty, and even Qianqian lost contact after the redemption war in Yuhe. Muchu asked back, is this also the reason why you broke up with the Iwan sect this time? Lucian's nodded, meeting Qianqian again. In order to prevent the previous nightmare from repeating the same mistake, I forcibly broke free from the shackles and tried my best to take Qianqian away from southern Xinjiang. However, at the most critical moment, I was blocked by my eldest brother. After the battle with the Beast King, I was already seriously injured and was easily defeated by my eldest brother, and then I was imprisoned in this lake-bottom swamp. Lucian's face was hideous and distorted, almost crazy. He didn't expect that it would be his eldest brother who jumped out to stop him at the last moment. Although Lucian Chang was obviously controlled by someone at this time, the brothers' quarrels and fratricide still happened after all. No one thought that the two heroes of Shan's were puppets manipulated from the beginning. Hearing Lucian's description, Muchu narrowed his eyes under the mask and suddenly said, "Since it is as you said, what is the true identity of the red-robed man who manipulated your two brothers?" Being able to manipulate two powerful destruction-level masters with such extraordinary strength, Mu couldn't help but think of the 4 Deyuan-level teachers who united the power of heaven to besiege him at Wangcheng Base that day. Only Deyuan-level masters can manipulate two destruction-level beings like this. Bloodline. Lu Jins muttered to himself, and suddenly raised his head. Through his messy hair, his pupils filled with bloodshot could be seen. When my brother stopped me that day, in the battle of life and death, I saw countless blood-colored threads entangled behind him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 473. Bloodline. Lu Jins almost squeezed out these words through his teeth, his eyes were bloodshot, which showed that he hated that person deeply. Listening to Lu Jin's description, Mu couldn't help but think of the scene he had seen in Wangcheng Base before. All human beings in the entire city were slaughtered, and countless broken corpses and body parts were scattered on the ground. In the center of the city, a bloody one eye was inscribed with blood to frame the Yanjai dynasty. Mu judged from the clues that the weapon used by the murderer who blamed him was the deadly steel wire. What do you mean? Since you are both 12 priests, you have never seen this person's true face. Mu is a little curious about this matter. As a colleague, you shouldn't not say hello, right? Hearing Mu's doubts, Lu Jins just laughed sadly and said in a hoarse voice. The heterogeneous religion is headed by the 12 immortal priests in red robes, but do you know that there are also hierarchies among these 12 immortal priests? The 12 immortal priests are named after the codes of the 12 earthly branches, which means the superior heavenly stems and the inferior yin and yang. Each person's identity is extremely secret. They join the heterogeneous religion for different purposes. Some people are pursuing immortality. Some of them are for seeking the truth. Lu Jin suddenly raised his head, his eyes flashing with extraordinary ferocity. But as I said before, the heterogeneous religion has been established long before the outbreak of the apocalypse. As far as I know, the heterogeneous religion was initially controlled by 6 people. It was not until the end of the world that the ruling class was gradually expanded to 12 people. This is also the origin of the 12 priests. The strength of the 6 of them far exceeds that of our group of red-robed emissaries who joined later. Even their identities are not known to us. Each one of them has a strength beyond the destruction level. 6 great immortal priests and 6 lower immortal priests, and these are the true ranks within the 12 immortal priests. 6 great immortals. Mu's eyes flashed and she fell into deep thought. He recalled the red-robed evangelist he had met along the way. Enlightenment at the Yuhei base, Duan Muchan, and Nightmare at the Zilan base, the Shan's duo in southern Xinjiang, and Dark Crow in the 10,000 Beasts Mountains. These people are all destructive-level powerhouses who have emerged in the apocalypse. Even if their strength is considered to be at the top of the entire apocalypse, they can only fall into the category of Xiaxiancy. And the 4 principal-level red-robed emissaries who provoked the heavenly Dao to surround and kill him in the Wangcheng base that day should be one of the 6 people who initially established the heterogeneous religion. In this way, the strength of this heterogeneous religion is really terrifying. Not to mention that the top management includes the leader of the human base, the guardian of a territory, countless followers under his command, and 6 Daowen-level people who have touched the pinnacle of the world. Strong. This force is enough to crush any human force in the world. Since the power of the heterogeneous religion is so huge, why has it been hiding in the dark and causing trouble, but has not been revealed to the public? Mu did not hesitate and directly raised her doubts to Lu Jins. Lu Jins shook his head when he heard this. The reason why the pagan religion doesn't hold any big events is because it's waiting for a person to appear. One person. Yes, there is a prophecy that in the event of such a doomsday natural disaster, Heaven will send down a mission to one person, so that he can support heaven's will, kill evil spirits, and stabilize the world. We will make him Son of Salvation. Son of Salvation. Muqiu's pupils shrank, and he couldn't help but think of his first battle with Wu Fa in Yuhe. The latter recognized him as the so-called Son of Salvation from the beginning. However, Muqiu defeated him later, and Wu Fa didn't know what he saw when he was about to die. He pointed at Muqiu and said a bunch of things that he didn't understand, but was killed by Muqiu impatiently. From this point of view, the son of the Savior should be a protagonist similar to one blessed by luck, inheriting God's will and saving the world. Being wary of the existence of the Son of Heaven and the Son of Salvation is one of the aspects. Until the sudden appearance of the Lord of Eternal Night, the heterogeneous religion did not hesitate to use all its strength to solve this anomaly. It can be seen that the foreign cult attaches great importance to the Lord of Eternal Night and the Eternal Night dynasty under his command. In this round of siege, Shang Xianxi did not hesitate to expose his own existence, but also to eliminate Muqiu, a variable that disrupted the plan. From Lu Jin's mouth, Muqiu learned many secrets about the heterogeneous religion and even this world. From this, it seems that the background of this heterogeneous religion is really quite big. Even so, Muqiu did not have the slightest fear in her heart, but instead became more determined to eradicate the heterogeneous religion. So, last question. Muqiu stared at the long-haired man kneeling at the bottom of the lake and said in a deep voice, "After doing so many things, what is the ultimate goal of the heterogeneous religion?" For a long time, the heterogeneous religion has been lurking in the shadow of the apocalypse, making trouble among the major bases, but no one knows what their purpose is. Hearing Muqiu mention this taboo topic, Lu Jin's pupils shrank suddenly and he raised his head to look at the mysterious masked man in front of him. However, what I saw was only the other party's deep pupils that contained blood. He shook his head slowly. "I don't know the specifics, I don't know. Those 6 immortals are extremely powerful and act secretly. I only know that all they did was to release some kind of terrifying existence that is so powerful that it transcends the world and can rival the gods." He scratched his messy hair. "I even suspect that the existence is related to the source of the apocalypse. If these remarks were passed on to the outside world, they would inevitably cause a great uproar. The source of the apocalypse is actually related to the plan of the alien religion. The only thing I can be sure of is that if the existence is really released, the entire human race will face a catastrophe." Oh. Muqiu did not expect that the alien religion's plan of making such a big fuss was actually just to release some unspeakable existence. The 6 great upper immortal divisions alone already have the peak Daiyuan level strength of the world, so what kind of terrifying existence are they trying to release? What are the conditions for the alien religion to release that existence? No matter what their purpose is, Muqiu will not let them get what they want. After a conversation, Lu Jin's voice was obviously much calmer, and there was no need to hide anything at this point. He just raised his head and said word by word. 8 sources of creation. Everything that the alien source cult has done so far is to collect the 8 sources of creation and open the door that seals that existence. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 474. 8 sources of creation. The familiar words appeared in his ears, and Muqiu couldn't help but recall the mysterious figure in white robes. The first time he heard the 8 sources of creation was from the mouth of the mysterious figure in white robes, and he also predicted that Muqiu, the Lord of Eternal Night, would face a disaster. Not long after that, Muqiu was besieged by the 4 Daiyuan level masters of Tiandao and Yaiwan sect, which did meet the disaster described by the white-robed man. And now, when Lu Jin's mentioned the location of the 8 sources of creation again, Muqiu's heart was immediately startled. Lu Jin's then explained. The so-called 8 sources of creation represent the 8 positions of Kinkan, Li, Gan, Zhen, Sun, Jin, and Dui in the 8 diagrams, which correspond to the 8 elements of heaven, earth, sun, moon, thunder, wind, mountain, and marsh. Mountains, rivers, grass, and trees, the creation of heaven and earth. Legend has it that the whole world is made up of these 8 elements, and everything changes around them. They are also the origin of all spirits. If you want to release that mysterious existence, you must first gather these 8 origins and break some kind of shackles between heaven and earth. At that time, the sun and moon will be reversed, and the stars will leak backwards, bringing unimaginable destruction to the whole world. Lujan's words became more and more excited, more like one blockbuster bomb after another, which made people change color and look horrified. But Muqiu was already prepared. It turned out that these were the 8 sources of creation mentioned by the mysterious white-robed man. He said calmly, "So, where are the 8 sources of creation you mentioned now?" Unexpectedly, Lujan shook his head and said, "Mountains, rivers, grasses, birds, beasts, insects, fish, everything you can see in the world is included in these 8 sources. And what the heterogeneous source cult wants to plot is the 8 beings in this world who have unique physiques and can best attract these 8 sources. They are the chosen ones of heaven by this world." In other words, the 8 sources of creation refer to 8 people. Muqiu's eyes suddenly flashed with a gleam of light. The heterogeneous source cult's plot must be far more than that simple. Lujan's nodded. The Iwan cult has made such a painstaking plan. One of the reasons is to find the existence with the qualification to inherit the origin. Muqiu seemed to have thought of something, looked at Lujan's and said, "Shanzi Duoxiang, could it be that you 2 brothers are one of the 8 origins of creation that the Iwan cult is looking for?" Lujan's obviously did not expect Muqiu's brain circuit to be so clear. He smiled bitterly and nodded. "Yes, my brother and I represent Shanzhen and Zedui, 2 of the 8 origins, respectively, which is why the Iwan cult came to us brothers in the first place." Lujan's tone was a bit self-deprecating. Fate is a trick. They should have been the chosen ones of heaven, but this became the root cause of their family's destruction. In addition to the 2 of us brothers, the person chosen by the heterogeneous sect as one of the 8 sources was also a former guardian of the Jade Sea with fire elemental abilities. This person was later killed by the Lord of Eternal Night. Muqiu remembered one of the 3 guardians of the Jade Sea base, Wang Daipen, who was called the Burning Sun. This person is a rare awakener of the fire element. His destructive power is amazing even in the destruction level. No wonder he was chosen as one of the 8 sources. It's a pity that Wang Daipen was killed by Muqiu later, and all his abilities were swallowed up by him. Since then, Muqiu's fire ability has also reached an unprecedented level. In this way, Muqiu can also be regarded as a person with destiny who has the origin. In addition, I know of another 8 source. Lujan's looked at Muqiu with a cold light in his eyes. The Beast King who is about to break through the destruction level in the nest of all beasts. That Beast King. What is unexpected is that the Beast King is also one of the targets of the heterogeneous sect. Some time ago, I and several other lower immortals besieged the Beast King, but we were defeated in the end. However, the Iwan sect would never let go of the 8 sources we found. So Lujan Chang summoned reinforcements from many parties this time in order to use the hands of many bases to help the Iwan sect capture the Beast King. Although the exchange between the 2 was brief, any word that was spread out was enough to shock the world. If Muqiu had not met Lujan's, one of the 12 priests, today, it would have been difficult to find out so many secrets of the Iwan sect. Muqiu looked at the long-haired man in front of him, whose limbs were imprisoned at the bottom of the lake by thick iron chains, covered with scars, and described as downtrodden. It would be difficult to associate him with the 2 heroes of Shan's who suppressed the southern border. "Thank you for your answer. So now, do you want me to rescue you from here?" Muqiu looked at Lujan's with a deep gaze. There is no free lunch in the world, especially in this cruel end of the world. Unexpectedly, Lujins shook his head and slowly stood up. The iron chains that bound his limbs created large ripples under the water. He stood at the deepest part of the lake. Through his messy hair, he could vaguely see a gleam of brilliance in his turbid eyes. Although I don't know who you are, I want to make a deal with you. Oh? What deal? I'm sure you can see that after forcibly breaking free from control and going through several battles, my body has already been exhausted and there is no way to save me. It's just that I am one of the 8 sources, and I am still very useful to the Iwan sect, so they imprisoned me at the bottom of this day's lake, and used the power of the day's water veins to nourish my body and hold on to my last breath. He shook his head, and he had long since become indifferent to life and death. Even if I can leave here, I don't have much time. I am willing to use the power of Zedui in exchange. Please do me a favor. What is it? Muqiu was tolerant enough for the dying man in front of him. Generally speaking, he didn't need to talk nonsense with him, and he would just use his ability to devour him. It was all because the other party made Muqiu a little interested, and he didn't mind helping out a little. At least in this beast tide, protect my daughter, Lu Qianqian, for me. The nightmare of the past flooded into his mind. Lujins clenched his fists, and blood oozed from his teeth. He was not a qualified husband, and even more an incompetent father. But at least at the last moment of his life, he was willing to protect his daughter at the cost of his life. Is that so? Muqiu's eyes suddenly showed a smile, the corners of his mouth rose, and a calm voice came from under the mask. I agree to your deal. After all, I can still protect my own men. Suddenly, groups of hot blood-red flames burst out from Muqiu's body, and they gathered around Muqiu like the most loyal believers. The pupils under the mask were blood-red, and 6 megatamas swirled around him like overlapping blood moons. The black robe behind him fluttered in the wind, and a skull throne burning with blazing flames vaguely appeared under him. This breath. As if he saw something, Lujin's pupils suddenly widened, and his tone was indescribably horrified and stunned. You are Lord of the Eternal Night. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 475. The Lord of Eternal Night. It was only at this moment that Lujins finally recognized the identity of the masked man in front of him, and his eyeballs couldn't help but tremble. The Lord of Eternal Night, the Lord of Eternal Night. He kept muttering something in his mouth, looking like a madman. Suddenly, Lujin seemed to understand something, and he suddenly raised his head and looked at the existence in front of him that was surrounded by countless red flames. The corners of his mouth widened and he actually laughed crazily. Okay, today I will make this deal with you, with my life. He is making a huge gamble, using the rest of his life to make a deal with the devil to compete with the so-called destiny. He suddenly raised his arms, and the iron chains wrapped around his wrists stirred up the surrounding water waves. His eyes were covered with bloodshot eyes, and a wave of terror suddenly erupted all over his body. Wow! In an instant, the waves at the bottom of Day's Lake were turbulent, the turbulent water waves rolled up suddenly, and ferocious water dragons condensed out. The majestic water pressure stirred up thousands of meters of waves with great momentum. In the distance, Yefanyan and Yeshinwei were fighting fiercely with a group of mutated beasts and cultists in front of the lake. At this moment, the 2 brothers and sisters were covered with corpses that had fallen to the ground, and the blood splattered around them even dyed the surrounding lawn red. Yefanyan's face was pale, and the forced overdraft of her weak body and the energy in her body had made her unable to hold on. Not far from her, Yeshinwei stood beside the pile of corpses covered in blood, with a look of madness still on his face. The corpses under his feet were all fragments of limbs and arms, with almost no intact corpses. It was even unclear whether they were humans or beasts. His hands turned into 2 giant hammers, smashing the flesh and blood of the few heathen believers around him into minced meat. This was a completely one-sided massacre. Weird, monster, they are two monsters. Not far away, the remaining purple-robed men looked at Yeshinwei and Yefanyan with shock on their faces. In just a few moments, most of the companions around them were killed by these two people. Even the beasts from the forest that were mobilized were not their combined enemies. Even injured destruction-level beings are far beyond the reach of minions like them. What's ridiculous is that they actually plan to use the human sea tactic to entangle a few people and wait for rescue from above. Yeshinwei's figure increased several times, and he stepped heavily on the ground with his feet. The tyranny in his eyes did not diminish, and he walked towards the remaining cultists at an unhurried speed. However, at this moment, a shocking explosion suddenly came from the Daze Lake ahead. I saw a huge wave suddenly rising on the lake in the distance, and it soon became more and more violent, and the tide surged. The water in the lake flowed backwards like the Milky Way pouring out. It seemed as if there was a heavy downpour in front of them, and the earth began to shake crazily. Roar! Water dragons that were even bigger and more solid than before surged out from the depths of the lake, roaring like trapped animals, causing the lake to overflow. The wildly rolling waves rolled and rose, and in an instant, the wind and clouds changed, the clouds became treacherous, and the heaven and earth instantly became darker at this moment. What the hell happened at the bottom of the lake? The sky overhead was instantly shrouded in clouds, as if heavy rain and strong winds were about to sweep down the next second. Even Yeshinwei couldn't help but change his expression. What kind of power could cause such a terrifying change in the sky? In detail, there are 9 water dragons rising from the bottom of the lake. The 9 rolling water dragons rise and roar at the clouds on the lake, making waves. The next second, the 9 water dragons let out a thundering roar, and then they all rushed towards the depths of the lake like wild beasts. Deep in the bottom of the lake, Mu-Chiu, whose whole body was surrounded by black flames, saw with her own eyes the terrifying vision caused by Lujin's, with deep meaning in her eyes. With such astonishing destructive power that can trigger celestial phenomena, Lujin's is also a rare strong man in the destruction level, and he is worthy of being one of the 2 heroes of Shan's who suppressed southern Xinjiang. But, after today, the world-famous Hongzhuangjiang will probably become history forever. Mu-Chiu lowered her head and looked down, only to see Lujin standing upright in the depths of the lake. The iron chains that bound his limbs were stretched straight, leaving bloody marks on his body, but even so, his eyes showed an unprecedented look of perseverance. "Qian, I'm leaving it to you." Lujin's voice became a little weak, and even his figure gradually blurred in the clear lake water. He stretched out his hand and held something in his hand. "Please give it to Qian." At the end of his life, this unqualified father still missed his daughter. With several dull sounds, the thick iron chains binding the limb sank to the bottom of the lake, and Lujin's figure completely disappeared before Mu-Chiu's eyes. Mu-Chiu slowly descended to the sky above the bottom of the lake. As he waved his hand, 2 objects deep in the lake floated up and finally fell into his palm. The first thing that catches the eye is a pink cartoon hairpin, which is obviously the type that young girls like. The other thing that fell into the palm was a round crystal blue water ball. The palm-sized water ball was full of water, and the tide at the bottom of the lake rippled out the moment it came into contact with the water ball, which contained unimaginable terrifying energy. Is this a different kind of military strategy? At the end of his life, Lujin's gathered all the energy in his body and condensed it into this water ball. This water ball is similar to a crystal core, but it blocks all the pure energy in his body. As long as this water ball exists, the Yuan cult will never find a source of Zedui to replace Lujin's. Really well intentioned. Mu-Chiu looked at the crystal blue water ball in his hand with deep eyes. But the next moment, Mu-Chiu suddenly crushed the water ball in his hand. In an instant, the surging energy compressed to the extreme burst out from the water ball, sweeping up the surging waves deep in the lake bottom. Yu just waved his hand, and the majestic black flame representing the devouring power instantly swallowed up all the energy contained in the water ball. After a while, Yu suddenly opened his eyes, and a faint light flashed in his blood-red eyes. What Lujins didn't expect was that Yu's ability was to swallow everything. In just a short moment, Zedui, one of the 8 sources of creation, had been completely swallowed by Yu. If the source of fire from swallowing Wang Daipen is counted, he has already obtained 2 of the 8 sources of creation. Yu stood deep at the bottom of the lake, raised his hand and waved it in front of him, and a shocking energy wave burst out from his body. In an instant, boundless black air swept and gathered into a pitch-black vortex portal. Following this inky black vortex, you can vaguely see a dark shadow space. The dark space that was originally damaged in the Daiyuan level battle is now healing rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. After absorbing Lujin's Zedui power, Yu's strength not only recovered to the peak, but even the shadow space was restored to its original state. It can be said that as long as Yu wants now, he can return to the eternal night territory of Dongxiao domain at any time through the coordinates of the shadow space. 8 Origins of Creation. Yu's eyes were deep. He got a lot of information hidden behind the end of the world from Lujins, and also knew the real purpose of the alien cult. The rise and fall of the human race naturally had nothing to do with him, but the current alien cult's plot was obviously not as simple as the power of the human race. Yu couldn't help but recall the mysterious white-robed man who emerged from his mind. What is his true identity, and what role does he play in this? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Yu. Chapter 476. The raging strange phenomenon in days seemed to only last for a moment, and the lake surface returned to calm in an instant, and the gloomy sky gradually became clear. Everyone who came back to their senses looked at the calm lake with shocked eyes. It is hard to imagine what kind of power can cause such a natural disaster-level phenomenon. Shua. Just as the faces of several heretic believers were filled with horror, several sharp cold lights suddenly flashed through the air. However, in the blink of an eye, the heads of these heretic believers had fallen to the ground, with shock and fear still remaining in their pupils. In the distance, Yeshinwei, who was covered in blood, retracted his outstretched arm that turned into a steel knife, and curled his lips. Be more careful about your own life when watching the fun in the next life. At this moment, a large number of corpses were piled up in front of Yeshinwei, and the air was exuding a strong smell of blood. He alone could kill thousands of heretic cultists and thousands of mutated beasts in a matter of seconds. He turned around and suddenly looked at his cousin in front of him, only to find Yefanyan staring blankly at the lake in front of him. Out of curiosity, he also looked up, but when he raised his head, his pupils shrank suddenly. I saw that the water level of the vast lake in front of me actually dropped several feet out of thin air, and the remaining lake water was still boiling steam. Suddenly, a steaming path appeared out of thin air between the lake water. As the lake water on both sides drained away automatically, steam continued to rise upwards, and a figure in black robe slowly walked out from the depths of the lake. Chiu Mu. Seeing Mu wearing a prajna mask walking out of the lake, the worry in Yefanyan's eyes gradually faded. However, Yeshinwei, who was covered in blood, could not help but tremble when he saw Mu's figure. This violent butcher who had just slaughtered wild beasts and evil men seemed to have changed into a different person after seeing Mu. It seems like your expressions have resolved quickly. Mu looked at the corpses on the ground in front of her, and her gentle tone made people feel at ease. After devouring Lujin's 8 sources of energy, his strength climbed to its peak, he gained Zedui's water element power, and he also learned the secrets of the heterogeneous religion, which really made him feel good. What happened deep inside the lake? Seeing that Miuchiu was safe and sound, Yefenyan also raised her doubts to the latter. The turbulent waves and the cloudy sky were all signs that what happened in the lake was unusual. Yeshinwei looked like he didn't care on the surface. After hearing this, Miuchiu directly informed the two of them what they saw at the bottom of the lake. However, he omitted Lu Jin's true identity and the matters related to the heterogeneous religion. Even if the current human coalition is used by the alien cult, it will not matter to Miuchiu and the Yanjai dynasty. He could have taken advantage of the beast's nest to engage in a fierce battle with humans, and when both sides suffered losses, he could have led the Eternal Night Army to make a profit. I didn't expect that Lu Jin's, one of the two heroes of the mountain and lake, would be imprisoned at the bottom of such a dark lake. It's better to round up and kill these beasts as soon as possible. Yeshinwei was indignant. He was also a destructive level powerhouse. He felt the same for Lu Jin's experience. The two heroes of Shan's and Zeke who suppressed southern Xinjiang are still quite prestigious among the human race, otherwise they would not have invited so many reinforcements this time. Yefenyan frowned slightly. No, the lake we are in is the territory of the Glen Crow, not to mention there are so many heretic cultists here. Yeshinwei also reacted at this time. Sister, do you mean that it was the alien cult that really imprisoned Lu Jin's? Yefenyan nodded and said softly, the heterogeneous religion imprisoned General Lu at the bottom of the lake. It has nothing to do with the beast's nest. Moreover, Dark Crow's performance that day also clearly joined the heterogeneous religion. There must be something behind this. There's another secret. Yeshinwei looked at Yefenyan's calm analysis and couldn't help being shocked. Mainly because my girl's mind is not on Chiu Mu, she is simply a contemporary Sherlock Holmes. She raised her head to look at Miuchiu and Yeshinwei, and her tone was somewhat solemn. I suggest that we get in touch with the coalition forces as soon as possible. There is another secret about the beast's nest. Now is not the time to launch an attack rashly. Miuchiu was immediately surprised when she heard Yefenyan's analysis. The other party had already guessed the truth of the matter almost exactly, except for the most important points that Miuchiu had concealed. In addition, Miuchiu narrowed her eyes slightly and lowered her head to look at the pretty Yefenyan. To be precise, she looked at the jade pendant around the latter's neck. From both Wufa and Lu Jin's mouths mentioning the name of the Son of Savior, it can be seen that the Iwan cult is still quite afraid of the Son of Savior. This reminded him of Yefenyan and the jade pendant around her neck that contained the power of heaven. Will she be the savior? Thinking of this, Miuchiu's eyes flashed with a faint light, and he decided to observe for the time being. After discussion, Miuchiu and the others decided to leave this strange valley first and rush to the location of the coalition forces as soon as possible. As the three people left, the entire valley became silent again, and the only thing that could be heard was the sound of the lake still steaming. Goo-goo. After a while, a burst of powerful space energy suddenly flashed in the hills in front of Days. Two figures emerged from the condensed space barrier. One of them covered his face with a square piece of paper cloth, and the other also wore a white mask, so his face could not be seen. What was even more terrifying was that both of them were wearing blood-red robes unique to the heterogeneous religion. The two looked at the scattered corpses on the ground beside the big lake, and the next moment they had already jumped to the bottom of the lake. Looking at the empty shackles and chains deep at the bottom of the lake, the imprisoned figure had disappeared. The figure wearing a white mask said, "Are you still a step too late? Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord." Author, MOCNU. Chapter 477. As soon as the words fell, the space around the two people suddenly distorted, and when they appeared again, they had arrived at the tragic battlefield next to the lake. The ground was littered with mutilated body parts, and it was hard to even tell whether they belonged to humans or those ferocious beasts. The rich bloody smell released by the mixed flesh and blood remains permeated the lakeside, making people sick to smell it. Two figures in red robes stood in the sky, looking at the tragic battlefield below. The masked figure said, "The source of Zedui is gone." Sure enough, such an important matter cannot be left to that flat-haired beast. The figure wearing a white mask next to him was silent for a moment, observing the pile of corpses below, and said, "The injuries on these corpses are different. They were stabbed, axed, and hammered. Judging from the battlefield alone, they should have been caused by one person. To be able to break through the outer space barrier with absolute strength and deal with these guards is at least a destruction-level existence." The voice of the man in the white mask was extremely strange, changing from male to female. In one sentence, he sounded as young as an 8-year-old child, and in the next second, his voice sounded like an old man. "This direction." The masked man thought of something and suddenly said, "Could it be the Tianyunkinji of the City of Clouds that Dark Crow talks about Yeshinwei? More than that, I know something about Yeshinwei. He alone cannot destroy the space barrier you set up." The white-faced man spoke, but his voice was still confused and varied. If Muqiu were here, he would definitely recognize that the mysterious figure wearing a red robe and a white mask was the nightmare that stirred up the storm in the world of gods and divided its souls into thousands. "Do you still remember the giant black tiger that suddenly appeared in Mang Mountain?" "What do you mean?" The masked man's face was covered with gauze, but he could vaguely see a red light flickering under the gauze. The voice of the nightmare is distorted and blurry, but when heard, it seems to be a dream talk from the depths of the soul, deeply rooted in people's hearts. He suddenly looked towards the quiet valley in the distance. "I suspect that he has also come to southern Xinjiang and is in this mountain range of beasts. The anomaly that appeared out of thin air in the East Sky territory, the founder of the Eternal Night dynasty. Lord of Eternal Night. On the other side, there is a forest battlefield somewhere in the 10,000 Beasts Mountains. The sky full of artillery fire reflected the mountain tops in a fiery red, and the vegetation and plants everywhere had been reduced to ashes by the ruthless artillery fire. The originally dense mountain forest turned into a barren plain, with broken limbs and flowing blood everywhere. Dense smoke mixed with blood mist echoed in the air, and from time to time, you could hear the miserable moans of some kind of beast before it died. The desolate plains were burning with seas of fire, and the remains of countless beasts that were not yet dead were swallowed up by the flames. Even the vast mountains in the distance were covered in flames, as if they were going to disinfect all the living creatures in this mountain range. The wasteland battlefield stretches to the hills on the other side, and a huge sea of people can be vaguely seen. The blackheads cover the entire hill like a wave. Everyone's body was stained with blood, or they were holding guns or having supernatural powers, and they were fully armed. The murderous intent in some people's eyes had not even faded away. "Medical team, hurry, he is dying. Gauze, is there any extra gauze? Save me, please." After a great battle, the battlefield was filled with the anxious shouts of soldiers. Most of these temporarily recruited human soldiers have not even undergone formal training. Entering this battlefield to fight against wild beasts is a near-death experience. In contrast, those awakened ones who had experienced in the ruins were much calmer. Even if their bodies were stained with blood, they silently picked up bandages and bandaged their wounds. Occasionally, some awakened people with healing abilities will show kindness and help some soldiers who are dying. Just as everyone was adjusting to rest, there was a sudden vibration on the horizon in the distance. Everyone who had just experienced a big battle was like a frightened bird. They were so busy looking into the distance regardless of their injuries. They saw a large number of ferocious-looking jungle beasts rushing out of the mountain forest ahead, rushing towards them. "No, it's a tide of beasts." The expressions of the soldiers who had not yet reacted to the brutal battle suddenly became terrified. Just as he was about to pull the trigger and shoot, he was suddenly stopped by an awakened person on the side. "No, look." Everyone looked intently, only to see human figures sitting on the backs of the beasts galloping in the distance. Tianlai novel network. These mutant beasts are actually driven here by humans. Squeak. At the same time, a strange cry suddenly came from the sky. Everyone on the ground looked up and saw a huge bat beast flying in the sky in front of them. There is also a human figure standing on the back of the huge bat, followed by a group of birds, but the power of the latter is obviously not as powerful as this huge bat. The energy aura exuding from the giant bat has reached S level. The pitch-black bat was seen making a long hiss before landing on a hill in the wilderness. A man walked down from the bat's back. He was wearing a plain robe and had a tuft of goat beard on his chin, looking like a Taoist priest. The Taoist priest walked down from the bat's back, but saw that someone was already waiting on the hill. In front of the crowd stood an old man holding a scepter and with a kind face. He was the person in charge of Qingyang Base, Lu Jinchang, known as one of the two heroes of the mountains and lakes. Next to Lu Jinchang stood a bronze-skinned muscular man. He was Shi Haoshan, the leader of the giant rock fortress who came to support the southern border. The fact that these two destructive-level masters came to greet him personally showed that the Taoist priest with goat beard had an extraordinary status. Behind Lu Jinchang and Shi Haoshan, there stood the leaders of the reinforcements from the major bases. Seeing the Taoist with goat beard coming down from the bat's back, Lu Jinchang still had that kind smile on his face. Taoist Master Lucien led everyone from Julu base to come to support, and I am grateful on behalf of all the people in southern Xinjiang. The Taoist with goat beard also smiled when he heard this, and responded, General Lu, what are you talking about? The great cause of our human race is in front, and our Julu base will naturally do its best to help. This Taoist with goat beard, who was called Taoist Master Lucien by Lu Jinchang, is also a powerful destructive level. After a few simple greetings, a gleam of brilliance suddenly flashed in the eyes of the Taoist with goat beard. He glanced at the leaders of other bases and stroked his beard subconsciously. I heard that in this battle against the beast tide, the overlord Guye who once shone brightly in the god's domain also showed up. I wonder which base he belongs to. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 478. As soon as these words came out, the whole place fell into silence for a moment. After the God realm catastrophe that imprisoned countless geniuses of the end of the world, countless geniuses from major bases escaped. And the souls of some awakened ones were killed and destroyed in the God realm continent, and their bodies in reality turned into a shell. Among the many awakened ones who survived, they all mentioned an existence that could be called a nightmare in the God realm, Overlord Guyet. Nearly 50% of the geniuses of the bases who died in the God realm did not die at the hands of those boss monsters, but died at the hands of that mysterious player. Some insiders remembered that the second son of the Taoist Lucien in front of them was killed by Overlord Guyet in the God realm catastrophe. After the God realm catastrophe ended, the furious Taoist Lucien explored the traces of the player with the title Overlord in major bases, but in the end it was in vain and ended in vain. Everyone suddenly understood. No wonder other bases were still watching at this critical moment. This Taoist priest Lucien rushed over without stopping. It turned out that he came to avenge his son's death. No wonder you came at this time with your nature of not getting up early without profit. It turns out that you have another purpose. Unlike other people who kept it secret, Shi Haoshan, who was full of muscles, snorted coldly and said bluntly. Taoist priest Lucien was not angry when he heard it, but smiled evilly. Master Shivao, I will not argue with you. If the stubborn stone in your family was killed by someone, can you still stand here indifferently? After saying that, regardless of Shi Haoshan's angry eyes, he looked around with a pair of narrow eyes at the leaders of the reinforcements from various bases. An invisible and terrible aura spread, passing over Lu Jinchang and Shi Haoshan, who were the leaders, and covering everyone's heads. The destructive pressure came over them, and many S-level awakeners present felt a chill down their spines. A hint of murderous intent flashed across the eyes of Taoist Lucien, and the suppressed anger was about to escape. At this moment, an unexpected figure walked out of the team. This was a handsome man, exuding an attraction to the opposite sex, which attracted the women on both sides to look at him from time to time. The eldest son of the Xiao family in Yongxiao City, Xiao Yunyi. Master, are you looking for the overlord Guye who walked out of the god's domain? Master Lucien's eyes suddenly flashed with a sharp light, and he stared at Xiao Yunyi with a sharp gaze. Why, he is from your base. Xiao Yunyi only felt that he was instantly wrapped in a strong murderous aura. He resisted the weakness of his legs, swallowed his saliva, and said, Master, you misunderstood, that Guye has nothing to do with my Yongxiao city. Then, he told everything about the chance encounter with Mu Qiu in the dense forest. However, in Xiao Yunyi's mouth, he concealed his selfishness. He claimed that the man named Qiu Mu pretended to be a scientific researcher of Zilan base to gain sympathy, and he took him away out of the morality of the human race. Master Lucien didn't care about these explanations. He only cared about the other party's current whereabouts. His eldest son died under the tide of corpses at the beginning of the outbreak of the apocalypse, and the only remaining second son was killed by humans. Having suffered the pain of losing his son twice in middle age, he vowed to take revenge on the other party. You mean, he fell into the space turbulence with your people? Taoist Master Lucien heard Xiao Yunyi's story, grabbed a tuft of goat beard under his chin, and his eyes flashed. Since the battle with the blood demon dog, Xiao Yunyi and others in panic immediately sent signals to Lu Jinchang and other main forces. After learning the situation, several teams changed their tactics and quickly joined together to see the current scene. Lu Jinchang on the side suddenly spoke at this time. I have also observed that battlefield. The power caused by the space turbulence is extraordinary, but the fluctuations are not violent. Taoist Master Lucien and nephew Xiao don't have to worry. It is very likely that the Ye family members are still in the 10,000 Beasts mountain range. Lu Jinchang's tone was calm, and his face was full of the kindness of an elder, as if he was really concerned about the life and death of Ye Fanyan and others. But it is not difficult for a discerning person to see that Lu Jinchang's words are just to persuade Lucien Taoist to stay. Sure enough, when Lucien Taoist heard this, his eyes suddenly flashed. In that case, I believe what General Lu said, and I hope General Lu will not let me down. Lu Jinchang narrowed his eyes and smiled, of course, of course. The two of them spoke with certainty, as if they didn't care about the life and death of the overlord Guye. But many awakened people present have already marked the death mark of the overlord Guye in their hearts. Some of these awakened people are human geniuses who survived the catastrophe of the God realm, and naturally they have also seen the unparalleled style of Overlord Guye in the God realm. But after all, the God realm continent is just a virtual game, and the Overlord Guye who walked out of the God realm has gradually lost the label of invincibility in the eyes of everyone. After all, the former killed so many seed players cultivated by the bases in the God realm, and the consequence is to attract crazy revenge from these bases. The current Taoist Lucien was just one of them, but the power he exuded alone made them feel pressured. Obviously, being targeted by the Taoist Lucien, the overlord Guye was doomed this time. In the crowd, Xiao Yunyi, who told Taoist Lucien about Mu Qiu, had an evil light in his eyes. From the bespectacled man Zhuang Qiang, he heard various stories about what happened to Mu Qiu and Ye Fanyan in the divine world. No wonder Ye Fanyan always secretly protects Qiu Mu. It turns out that the two of them had already become friends before. It's no wonder that Ye Fanyan always rejects his kindness. Maybe he already had a secret love for Qiu Mu in the divine world. Thinking of this, Xiao Yunyi couldn't help but clench his teeth, his eyebrows stood up, and veins appeared on his face. What's ridiculous is that he has been treating the other party as a guest of honor, thinking of taking him back to the base to make up for his mistakes. Qiu Mu. A trace of vicious killing intent flashed in Xiao Yunyi's eyes. He must get Yefanyan, whether it is to increase his upper limit of abilities or to consolidate his position as the eldest son of the Xiao family. Regardless of whether he is Chiumu or Overlord Guy, he must let him die in the 10,000 Beasts Mountains this time. On the hills in the distance, Lu Qianqian, who was wearing a bright cheongsam, saw everyone's performance in her eyes. Obscure and fiery glances came from all around, and a look of disgust flashed across his cold face. Turning his head to look in the direction of Taoist Lucien, Xiao Yunyi, and others, he slightly opened his red lips and said disdainfully, "Act recklessly. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord." Author, Mo. Chapter 479. Ouch. Under the scorching sun, a long hawk-like cry suddenly came from the sky above a dense and lush jungle. Immediately afterwards, a black shadow flashed across the dense jungle below, blowing up large swaths of fallen leaves. I saw a huge eagle beast speeding past under the scorching sun in the sky. It was so fast that I could only vaguely see a black after-image. Upon closer inspection, there are actually two figures of a man and a woman standing on the back of this eagle beast. The man wore a black robe and a dark red ferocious mask on his head. The woman had a high ponytail tied behind her head, wore a long slim dress, and her face was as delicate as a fairy descending from heaven. Standing on the back of the eagle are Muqiu and Yefanyan. Hache. Suddenly, a loud sneeze sounded from beneath the two of them, causing the birds and beasts in the forest below to fly away. Feeling a bump on her back, Muqiu stepped on her foot, signaling the eagle beast under her feet to be more stable. Unexpectedly, this eagle beast actually turned its head, with a humanized look of resentment in its eyes, and said, "Brother, can we take a break?" What responded to him was the deep pupils under the mask. The giant eagle beast hurriedly shivered, and accelerated its speed while fluttering its wings. Buzz dash. At this moment, a dense swarm of fluttering bees suddenly flew from the sky ahead, blocking the way of the eagle beast. These wasps have slender bodies and are dozens of times larger than ordinary flying insects. The thing about the size of a needle tube showed a strange dark purple color, and it was obviously a mutated insect carrying a highly poisonous nature. The huge swarm of poisonous bees was about to rush towards the eagle beast Muqiu, and the two were riding, submerging the latter in the poisonous wave. Suddenly, a cold light flashed in the eyes of the flat-haired eagle beast, and a ferocious color emerged in its pupils. Grandma is a bear, seeking death. He can't deal with the old man above, and he can't deal with such a group of little bugs. The wings suddenly flapped forward, and the feathers between the wings shot out like bullets, streaking through the air with a sharp cold light. In an instant, the large number of bees and insects that swept forward were exploded by bullet-like feathers, and large pools of smelly purple blood sprayed into the sky. After the feathers that shot off the giant eagle beast fell off, the flesh and blood on the wings condensed, and dense feathers grew again. This huge eagle beast carrying Muqiu and the two is none other than Yeshinwei, who has the power of quantum recombination and is known as Tianyunkinji. In order to speed up the rendezvous with the large army, Yeshinwei used his supernatural power to assimilate his body with a dead mutated eagle beast, carrying Muqiu and Yefanyan through the Yalan Canyon. Compared to the dangerous jungle valley, the vast sky undoubtedly makes it faster to reach the nest of beasts. As for Yeshinwei's own wishes, no one really seems to care. Speeding across the sky again, Yeshinwei, who transformed into an eagle beast, stuck out his tongue and looked tired. Suddenly, he seemed to feel something, and turned his head to look at the dense mountain forest below. "There's a situation, it seems like there's a fight down there. I feel energy fluctuations down there. Is it a human being?" Muqiu and Yefanyan looked at each other on their backs. It stands to reason that at this time, the human side should launch a siege in the direction of the beast's nest. How could anyone appear in this deep mountain forest far away from the beast's nest? Muchu stepped on the back of the eagle beast transformed by Yeshinwei again. The latter understood, gasped helplessly, and finally fluttered its wings and slid down. Deep in the mountain forest pointed by Yeshinwei, an unknown human-animal war is fiercely unfolding. The deeper you go into the jungle, the greater the number of beasts and monsters hidden inside. Ouch! I saw a large group of wolves entrenched deep in the mountain forest. These evil wolves have all been baptized by mutant energy. While its size expanded several times, its extended fangs and claws shone with an icy cold light under the scorching sun. Most of these mutant wolves are C-level and B-level beasts, and the leader is an S-level ferocious wolf king. It can be seen that there are hundreds of wolves in this group, which is enough to dominate an ordinary town in southern Xinjiang. In the center, surrounded by a huge number of mutated wolves, several human figures were struggling to resist the attacks of the wolves. A man transformed into a tall orc, holding two steel knives in his hands, slashing at the wolves that were biting around him. Next to the orc man was a heroic woman wearing camouflage clothing. She picked up the scattered stones on the ground and held them in her hands. A stream of light flashed in his eyes, and he suddenly swung the stones in his hand forward. The moment the broken stones touched the wolf's body, it exploded like a cannonball. Dozens of wolves that were attacked were instantly shattered into pieces, leaving no bones left. However, the rich blood floating in the air inspired these mutated beasts to become even more ferocious. There were roaring sounds coming from the mouth, and more evil wolves were coming toward the two of them with fierce glares in their eyes. The two of them struggled to resist the ferocious wolves and beasts coming from all directions, and couldn't help but panting. In fact, with the strength of the two of them, they have every chance to break the siege of the wolves and escape from this place. But it was hard to hold back that a few people had experienced too many dangers along the way. Even the two S-class awakened ones were injured and could not show their full strength. What's more, the mission of the two people is to protect the important people behind them to reach the beast's nest. Just under the boulder behind the two people, there are two figures standing. The two figures are one tall and one short, one fat and one thin. The tall one has a round body and a somewhat wretched face. The short one is a little boy in his teens, rubbing his sleepy eyes and looking like he hasn't woken up yet. But unlike ordinary people, this boy's skin is actually an abnormal purple color. The tall, fat man looked at the little boy anxiously, saying, "My little ancestor, are you still okay? Our lives depend on you." The handsome little boy rubbed his eyes, and his voice was still a little childish. "Uncle Fatty, I'm still so hungry." The fat man called Uncle Fatty by the little boy slapped his head. "Ancestor, what kind of ability do you have that can be charged?" Looking back at the boy who still had a wooden face and seemed completely unmoved, the man wanted to slap himself again. Why did he talk so much to this piece of wood? Looking at the terrifying wolf pack that surrounded them and was increasing in number, the man said in panic, "Have you used up all the crystal cores that Ji Yufeng gave you?" When the words Ji Yufeng and crystal core were mentioned, a little light appeared in the boy's eyes again. He licked his lips and shook his head with an unsatisfied look. "No more, all eaten." The fat man slapped his forehead again with a strange expression. "It's over, do I really have to ask that person to help?" He held a dark token in his hand, but trembled and hesitated to crush it. The man and woman standing in front of them were still struggling to resist the attacking wolves, and from time to time they could see the figures of several A-level fierce wolves. However, when the four were busy resisting the wolves, they did not notice that there were three pairs of eyes quietly spying on them in the dark forest not far from them. "Why are there only 4 people?" Yeshinwei frowned. He thought he would encounter a group of human troops, but the 4 people in front of him were obviously beyond his expectations. These 4 people suddenly appeared in this deep mountain forest, which was obviously unusual. "What do you say, save or not save?" He turned his head and looked at the two people beside him. Under the mask, Muqiu's eyes rarely flashed with surprise. Why did he appear here? The plump man with a man and a woman protecting him was the fat man who had been in the same team with Muqiu in Yuhe. After Yuhe was replaced by the Yanjai dynasty, the top management was replaced, and this fat man also got a management position with his smooth personality. Later, the Yanjai dynasty became famous in the world, and the status of this fat man as one of the earliest management naturally rose. This fat man was not doing well in Yuhe, so why did he run to the vast mountains of Nanjiang? But what surprised Muqiu the most was not the fat man, but the little boy with purple skin next to the fat man. Although the aura emanating from his body was extremely obscure, Muqiu knew that this creature he created personally was very clear. This is the Yanjai royal family. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 480. The Eternal Night royal family was created by Muqiu himself. Based on the original Black Shadow soldiers, Muqiu used the Oracle Gigzu power of the Mangekyo Sherinon to create a physical carrier for them. Then, the soul energy of tens of thousands of orders of magnitude obtained from the Zilan base was injected into the soul, and this new race was born. Since then, the Lord of Eternal Night has also become the true creator of the Eternal Night dynasty, a godlike existence for the Eternal Night people. The Eternal Night people created by Muqiu are of different sizes, ages, genders, and even races. The handsome little boy in front of him is obviously a human-like Eternal Night person. While Muqiu was still thinking secretly, the battle in the mountains ahead had entered a white-hot stage. The blade of the steel knife held by the orc man turned into two hot lasers, and the hot blade light flashed in the air while waving. Countless mutant wolves were chopped into charred corpses under these two laser-long knives. On the other side, the heroic woman in camouflage took out a pair of gloves from nowhere, with a blue crystal core embedded in the gloves. As she put on the gloves, she thought about it, and all the gravel on the ground around her appeared in front of her. Immediately, a unique energy wave was released in front of the woman, and all of it was poured into the floating stones. A beam of light flashed in the woman's eyes, and she stretched out her palm and clenched it, and the floating stones in front of her also shot out in an instant. The lightning-like stones exploded like cannonballs at the moment of shooting, and a large number of evil wolves in front were instantly annihilated. There was a real smell of gunpowder in the air, choking people's noses and throats. Both of them obviously used all their strength, but the number of wolves in front of them was beyond imagination. After a while, there was still no trend of retreat, and the orc man and the heroic woman became a little overwhelmed. Even the fat man with a fat body joined the battlefield. He took out a heavy mace and swung it at some point. As his body moved, he turned into a human top, crushing the wolves that were rushing towards him. This fat man was actually a speed type A-level awakener. Whoa! Just as the battle entered a white-hot stage, a deafening long howl suddenly came from the depths of the wolf pack. The evil wolves that pounced on the four people around them also began to howl, and then the wolf pack in front gradually spread out a path. A snow wolf with a white body walked out from the depths of the dark forest, emitting powerful energy fluctuations. Oh no, it's the Wolf King. The orc man was the first to sense something, and shouted to his companion beside him. Hurry up and find a chance to leave here. Whether it was an orc or a heroic woman, both of them were rare S-level awakeners in the apocalypse. If it were in normal times, the two would naturally not be afraid of this Wolf King, and any one of them could fight with it alone. But the two of them had consumed a lot of energy in the battle with the Beast Tide, and their energy was mostly depleted. They were already strong on the outside but weak on the inside. At this moment, the two of them together might not be the opponent of the Wolf King. In the next second, the Wolf King's eyes were full of ferocity, and he jumped into the air and turned into a snow-white afterimage, rushing towards the four people. The orc man was holding a pair of laser swords and was about to resist, but the snow-white afterimage was already in front of him. Subconsciously raising his arms, 2 bloody and hideous scars appeared on his arms. The heroic woman in camouflage also wanted to attack, but she was knocked to the ground by the huge figure in an instant, and she was exhausted. After the Wolf King dealt with the 2 people, he did not stop, and opened his white fangs and claws to grab the fat man. No matter how fast the fat man was, he was only an A-level awakener, and he could not escape the Wolf King's bite. Seeing the fat figure about to fall into the wolf's mouth, the purple-skinned boy behind him suddenly opened his deep eyes. The blood-red light that belonged to the eternal Night Royal family flashed in his eyes. Shua! At this moment, a sound of breaking through the air suddenly came from the distant jungle. I saw an arm that was more than 10 meters long suddenly stretched out from the distant jungle, and the palm part suddenly turned into a ferocious blade. Wherever it passed, the evil wolves were split in half by the sharp blade. The rubber spring-like arm continued to move forward, and rushed towards the direction of the Wolf King with the sharp blade. With a whoosh sound, even the Wolf King could not dodge this amazing attack. The blade instantly cut off a large piece of flesh from the hind legs, and the body fell to the ground and rolled repeatedly. Damn it, I hate animals and wild beasts the most now. TNLAI Novel Network. Accompanied by a shout, a man in casual clothes walked out of the forest with his hands in his pockets. He was unkempt and had a sad look on his face. Right behind the man, there was a beautiful girl with exquisite appearance. Then, a figure wearing a mask and a black robe vaguely emerged in the jungle.